Mysterious stones from space, engraved with hieroglyphs, remain an inexplicable enigma. The history of rocks falling from the sky dates back to ancient times. Historical records say that holy stones, possibly meteorites, often even became objects of worship. But what could be more mysterious than to suddenly find ourselves in front of stones engraved with hieroglyphs, these stones that have fallen from space? This is exactly what a young man faced in 1908. The story is very interesting, and what makes it even more fascinating is that a similar space stone seems to have fallen many years earlier. The first incident occurred in the Cowichan Valley area, an area around the Cowichan River in Cowichan Lake, Vancouver Island, British Columbia of Canada. And the story was published in a front page article in the Cowichan Leader newspaper, September 5th, 1908, with the title, A Message from Mars. Willie McKinnon, a 14-year-old son of Angus McKinnon, had a most remarkable experience and miraculously escaped death on Thursday morning last, the article wrote, and while working on his father's garden, about 11:30 o'clock, a meteorite about 10 inches in diameter was hurled from space and was buried in the ground about 8 feet from where the boy was standing. The meteor was heard for several minutes before it hit the earth, but the child, thinking it was a passing train, paid no attention until the celestial visitor struck the ground, throwing rocks in all directions and producing an effect as if an earthquake had occurred in that area. The boy was, of course, greatly alarmed and ran home to alert his parents that something very strange was happening. They found that the meteorite was glowing, and for over half an hour they could not touch it. The meteor, or whatever it was that fell, was almost as round as a marble, and the surface deeply incised with what looked like hieroglyphs. The meteor had passed through the branches of 2 trees in its flight and had broken them. It fell at an angle of about 45 degrees and was traveling in a northwesterly direction when it hit the ground. McKinnon, after the incident, spent a lot of time trying to interpret the meaning of the marks on the stone. A month later, it was reported that the Division of Mines Geological Survey in Ottawa was seeking fuller data, quote unquote, beyond that contained in the Cowichan Leader. The time of day, the nature of the sounds heard from the fall of the body, their duration and the direction from which they appeared to come, the depth of the hole and the nature of the ground. The questionnaire even included a purchase offer, although the amount could be negotiated with terms. Whether in fact this meteor made its way to Ottawa for public preservation, we do not know, unfortunately. As for the so-called hieroglyphs, was it in fact the Rosetta of space? Logically, the indications on the surface of the meteorite were only the end product of its melting as it entered the Earth's atmosphere. Whatever the explanation, the question mark remains. Is the stone in some small enclosed place in Ottawa, or is it still in the possession of family descendants or somewhere else? What happened to the space stone remains a mystery. It appears to have never been examined, and its current location is unknown. However, what we do know is that on November 14, 1865, the Brooklyn Daily Eagle also published a story about a similar stone falling from the sky. The stone was also covered in strange engravings. And the story goes like this. James Lumley, an old hunter in the Rocky Mountains who had stopped at the Everest Hotel for several days, makes a very remarkable statement to us, which, if verified, will cause the greatest excitement in the scientific world. Lumley states that about the middle of September last, he was setting traps in the mountains. We're talking about 1865. We know that the Civil War took place around then. So, he states that about the middle of September last, he was setting traps in the mountains, about 75 or 100 miles above Great Falls on the Missouri, I guess the Missouri River, and in the region known as the Cadet Pass. Shortly after sunset one night, he saw a brilliant luminous body in the heavens moving at great speeds to the east. It was fully visible for at least 5 seconds, when it suddenly split into particles resembling, as Lumley describes, a rocket exploding in midair. A few minutes later he heard a great explosion, which shook the earth very perceptibly, and a little later followed a sound as of a whirlwind coming through the forest. A strong wind sprang up about the same time, but suddenly subsided. The air was also filled with a strange smell of sulfur, he said. What had James Lumley seen? The fall of a meteorite, or maybe the explosion of a spaceship? The following day, he will discover at a distance of about 2 miles from him, the place of his camp, as far as the eyes could see, in a direction of vast devastation. A path had been cut through the forest, giant trees had been uprooted or cut down close to the ground. The tops of the hills had been shaved, and the land seemed to have been plowed in many directions, in many places. Doesn't it sound like the Tunguska event in Russia, in Siberia? Now, great and widespread destruction was visible everywhere. Following the tracks of the desolation, he soon found that its cause was in the form of a huge stone on the side of the mountain. But now comes the most remarkable part of his story. An examination of the stone, or at least those parts of which were visible, showed that it was divided into compartments, and that in various parts of it curious hieroglyphs were carved. Lumley also discovered fragments of a glass-like substance, and here and there were dark spots, as if caused by a liquid. He is convinced that the hieroglyphs were the work of human hands, and that the stone itself, though a fragment of the immersed body, must have been used for some purpose. Strange as the story may seem, Lumley speaks with such sincerity that we are forced to accept that he is telling the truth. It is evident that the stone he discovered was a fragment of a meteorite that had become visible in this area in September, observed at Leavenworth Galena in this city by Colonel Boonville. At Leavenworth they saw it split into pieces or erupt. This curious incident was reported in 1865 and is still of interest. Did Lumley see a UFO explosion? Where did the carved stone with the engraved hieroglyphs come from? Both related incidents give us reason to ask about this, to contemplate this. And this is, of course, inexplicable. This I've translated from a Greek article. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.